How has Me Too impacted France? Since the Weinstein scandal broke back in October over in the U.S., women are certainly speaking out more here. Complaints filed with police have soared in this country. But the culture's not the same as in Anglo-Saxon or Nordic countries. Last month here, the argument raged over a petition where some, including actress Catherine Deneuve, defended men's right to bother women. What's been missing are revelations that bring down powerful men. That is, until now. It was the Me Too movement that inspired a woman and then a second to press cases against Europe's most prominent Islamic scholar, Tariq Ramadan. Rape charges have now been filed against the Swiss grandson of the founder of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood. He's had to take a leave of absence from his teaching position at Oxford University. What will this case teach us? Will others follow? Currently, the public spending minister here in France refusing to step down after a complaint was filed against him. Gérald Darmanin denies wrongdoing and insists on the presumption of innocence. As the Me Too movement raises questions about due process and what's fair, we're also going to be asking about power, its abuse, and how the French see the matter. Today in the France 24 debate, Me Too and the French, and with us, Marion Duquesne, spokesperson for Les Effrontés. How would you translate Les Effrontés?
I think the Shameless is a good way to translate Les Effrontés.
A women's rights organization.
Exactly.
And also with us, attorney Martine Moscovici, who's...
Good evening.
Nice to see you. Thanks for being with us again. And currently you have several rape cases that where you're defending the victims.
Right.
And we also want to welcome from London, psychiatrist and best-selling author Raj Persaud. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening.
And here in the studio, joined as well by France 24's Virginie Hertz. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. The Me Too effect was immediate at French police stations back in October. For the last 3 months of 2017, the number of rape and sexual violence incidents reported up 31%. Among them, 2 women who claim that Tariq Ramadan raped them back in 2009. He's now been formally charged and spent the weekend in prison pending a bail hearing. Solange Mougin has more.
In France, he's one of the most high-profile individuals to be accused of sexual assault since the Me Too movement began. Islamic scholar Tariq Ramadan is now in jail, while a formal investigation gets underway to find out if he's a rapist. Last year, 2 different women accused the 55-year-old Swiss national of sexual violence. On Thursday, Ramadan was brought before 3 judges and one of his accusers. For more than 3 hours, the woman, who is disabled and prefers to remain anonymous, described the 2009 attack. For her lawyer, the courtroom confrontation was a difficult but legally necessary one.
My client was able to say what she needed to say to Mr. Ramadan to his face. He denied the charges, so the work ahead will be to find out what happened to these different women.
The woman's accusations came on the heels of others. In October, feminist activist Henda Ayari accused Ramadan of rape. She said he choked her so violently she thought she was going to die.
He raped me. Afterwards I was crying, and he made fun of me. He said, "Poor little girl, now you know what a man is."
4 of Ramadan's former students have also come forward, saying he abused them when they were minors. The grandson of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Ramadan holds a professorship at Oxford University. Since the accusations, he's taken a leave of absence. However, he still remains the head of the Islamic Institute of Ethical Training in Paris. Denying any wrongdoing, he's filed a countersuit for false accusations.
Yeah, before we go into Tariq Ramadan, just one thing that struck me watching that report, Martine Moscovici, one of the 2 women going public on camera and saying on camera, "I was raped." The other one preferring to use a pseudonym. It's a tough decision whether or not to go public.
It's very tough because when you do it in public, after everyone knows you've been raped, and it's not very easy after when you go to your bakery and buy bread and the baker say, "Oh, I've seen you on TV," and it's very hard to do. The clients I defend, most of them, I prefer them not to be on TV.
You advise them not to get in the public eye?
Yes, because it's going to be very tough for them after, I know it, and I prefer to prevent them.
Virginie Hertz, again, just to remind people, Tariq Ramadan, he's the guy who was always on TV whenever there's a debate, especially in this country. We always have debates on secularism and multiculturalism and the place of religion. He was the guy who always came out for those big intellectual debates.
Yes, but I think that like 2 years ago it stopped and most media didn't want to invite him anymore. He was like seen as ambiguous and probably there was a lot of polemical about his double speech, him saying things on TV and then saying other things when he talked to the Muslim community in little conferences. So he was not really welcome anymore.
But it's nothing to do with what we're talking about here.
No, it's nothing with.
And we've also discovered that there were allegations that have since surfaced against him from former students when he was teaching in Switzerland.
Well, what happens is that once one woman dares to open and to openly accuse someone, a man, then most of the other victims suddenly feel that they are not alone and they could now maybe say something against him. So most of the time, but I guess that you can confirm that once one woman says something, then the other victims.
This is very true. I have a case when a photographer has raped many victims. It begins with 4 victims. Now 17 women has accused him.
A bit like the case of that doctor in the United States for working with the gymnasts.
It's the same. It's kind of the same thing.
Kind of the same thing. In the case of Tariq Ramadan, he's saying it's a plot, and there's been a lot of turning the tables on the 2 women who've come forward. Obviously, there is a court case on it. You don't want to pass judgment, but it's hard not to.
Well, there have been so many proof of so many men who have been accused of rape and who have said that they were innocent and hadn't done anything. So for me, it's important to believe first the words of the women who have had the courage to come forward. And I think the justice and the investigation will prove, but the more women come with the more specific details about stories of harassment, the more it's plausible that the person actually did perpetrate this assault.
And I want to add something. I defend a lot of victims of rape. The rapers never say, I did it. They always say she agreed to have sex with me.
Raj Persaud, Tariq Ramadan, who's been a guest, by the way, on this show in the past, always well-spoken, very eloquent, thoughtful. Is there a Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing that goes on with people in positions of power?
Well, that's an excellent question, which is that what is the kind of profile of the kind of highbrow or middle class or professional sexual predator? And one of the problems is that I think many women who end up being victims have a view that someone who's well-spoken, intelligent, articulate, professional, perhaps even married, for example, just doesn't fit the profile of a sexual predator. And therefore, they may expose themselves more to risk. And if you hear some of these stories where the man invites the woman up to the hotel room for a drink or gets the woman to put herself in a vulnerable position, it sounds as though women are often misjudging what actually is the character of what you might describe as the professional middle-class sexual predator.
Because that was the case with at least one of the 2 women who filed a complaint. And I remember in the newsroom speaking with one of the female reporters and saying, but she went up to his hotel room, and she replied to me, oh, yes, but men in positions of power, they usually have a suite, and they say, oh, we forgot a dossier upstairs, and that's where it ensues.
Yeah, so people often say, I'm really surprised that it turns out that this person is a sexual predator. Well, you shouldn't be surprised, because by definition, if they radiated signals of dangerousness, no woman would ever put themselves in a kind of vulnerable position. So one of the classic signs that these people are charming, they're intelligent, and they're the kind of last person you would think of as being a sexual predator. So women should be very careful about the idea they have in their heads as to who actually is a sexual predator and who isn't. The other key point to understand about the psychology of this situation is sex is a very compulsive behaviour. It's interesting how again and again, when one case comes to light, a whole raft follows in behind it. It's very unlikely that people in this situation are going to just commit the act once. Very often, because of the compulsive nature of the sexual drive, you're going to see more and more cases come out. It's very rarely, if ever, the case that it's ever going to be a one-off. But often the women who are the victims of the particular case think it's just once, it's just happened to me. And we also know from the personality profile of these predators, they're Machiavellian, they're narcissistic, they're psychopathic. There's a cluster of personality features where they make the women think to themselves, maybe it was something about me, given this man is so charming and intelligent and such a pillar of society. Maybe it was something about me that led to the attack. And if I could disagree with one of the panelists, I think actually the more that women can be encouraged to come forward and be brave enough to actually be not anonymous, the more they will normalise this situation in terms of people coming forward and levelling the accusation, because we need that, we need the publicity, so that women who have been scared to come forward in the past will do so in the future. Because we need to think hard about what's happening in France. Is it something about the social climate of France or the legal climate where it looks like women seem so far on the evidence to be more afraid of coming forward?
Virginie, you host for our French language channel, the Women's Affairs show, and is there something French about coming forward or not coming forward?
Yes, well, there are different points. First of all, I would say that in France, generally, there is no culture of denunciation, or people in sexual harassment cases, but other cases too, are very cautious about denouncing somebody else if he's in a dominant position. And this is due to the fact too that even when accusations are very clear, most of the time the person is not fired. Is it in cases of sexual harassment or not? So most women wouldn't dare to say something. And even, for example, concerning sexual harassment in France, now the movement metoo, Balance ton port, in media, for example, there were 2 men who were suspended. They were suspended. They couldn't come to work anymore. There were bosses in very big media companies. But finally, after several weeks, they came back and they still are working now. So those women who dared maybe to say something finally are in the position that they see that the guy was not punished at all. So
you're saying that France, there's more of a culture of deference than there is in Anglo-Saxon countries and Nordic countries?
Probably. I think that in Anglo-Saxon countries, when there is just an allegation of a scandal, let's say financial scandal or sexual scandal, the person is just put aside because the whole institution doesn't want to be hit by the scandal. In France, it's not the case. It's just that there is the presumption of innocence, and this is the most important. And so this makes that victims in sexual harassment cases or other cases don't dare so easily to name and blame the person.
Marion Duquesne, you agree?
Yes, I do. I think if you see Dominique Strauss-Kahn, for instance, the whole of the media and all the political class knew that he was a sexual predator for decades, and nobody ever said anything, because I think we have this notion of privacy in France and of private lives that don't concern us outside of the family. So I absolutely agree, it's true, and you can see that in France people are less likely to resign or to be put aside than other countries. If you look at our minister, whether he is innocent or not, that is not the question.
We'll talk about the Minister of Public
Darmanin
in a short while. Just on this point, though, I want to ask again, Raj Persaud, sitting across the channel there, do you think that when it comes to deference vis-a-vis people in high places of power, there's a difference between France and Britain?
Well, I think it's very interesting to raise the question about whether something's different happening in France at a social and psychological level. We've already tackled the issue of whether people, or women in particular, in France are more afraid to come forward because they don't think the legal system may be as sympathetic, or maybe wider culture will be as sympathetic as in Anglo-Saxon countries. But I wonder if there's another thing going on. And it goes back to the comment by the famous French actress Catherine Deneuve about this idea that maybe in France there's more of an expectation that men are men, women are women, they're different. We expect men to chase women. They're kind of like biologically wired up to do that, and women should expect to be chased. And I have to say, first of all, that Catherine, although I'm a big fan of the famous French actress, needs to be careful about extrapolating from her personal experience as a very attractive star as to whether her personal experience of male chivalry towards her really replicates what everyday women in France might experience. So when she's talking about male attention, she may have a different experience to what most other women may have. But the key point is this: maybe in Anglo-Saxon countries like in America and in the UK, our view is men and women cannot be viewed as different in any biological or social or cultural sense at work. For example, we've got to treat them as exactly the same. I wonder if in France there's a difference, there's a more accepting of this view that men and women are different. There's going to be a frisson between them, flirtation between them, and maybe that culture, although it has certain benefits, has certain downsides when it comes to sexual assault.
There's also another thing. When a woman goes to the police to complain for rape, sometimes the police officer says, OK, there's nothing important. We won't, you don't have to complain. We have also this problem in France with the police officers.
And maybe just to add to this cultural specificity, or French supposed cultural specificity, maybe there is a change in generation too. I mean, a lot of feminist movement reacted to Catherine Deneuve's...
we're going to talk about Catherine Deneuve and about that.
And some men, a lot of men too. Last week, men in Le Monde, L'Hebdo, all the magazines said, not me too, but we too. We are with the women, and we don't see this men-women relation as traditional.
Is the change in France generational? We'll pick up on that point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.
Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval.
Transnistria, a Russian-speaking enclave in Moldova, where Romanian is the official language. A breakaway republic living in the shadow of Moscow. An uncertain future has driven locals away from the separatist province. The international community has not recognized it. The economy is depressed. Censorship is widespread. Transnistria and its capital Tiraspol is increasingly caught between Europe and Russia.
Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
We are journalists, and normally you have to listen to us, but you have things to tell us too. Maybe you've experienced a dramatic event, or you've got something important to say. You want to make a difference. That is why we created The Observers. Now, the first step is very easy. You get in touch with our team. Send us your images, tell us what you've seen. And then it's our job to get your voice out there, on our site, on social networks, on your mobiles and tablets, and on TV, of course. You can appear in our weekly show via webcam. Or perhaps we'll come see you in person, where you live, in your country, your town, and we'll work together on a report for our investigative show, The Observers Direct. So you get the idea. This show is your show, your way to get your voice out to the world.
Welcome back. Before we resume the France 24 debate, some of the stories we're following for you in the newsroom. First day in court for the alleged last sole survivor of the group that carried out the Paris attacks, Saleh Abdeslam, refusing to answer a Belgian court's questions over the March 2016 shootout with police in a Brussels suburb. The first papal audience for a Turkish president in 59 years, Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Pope Francis expressed common concerns over Jerusalem, while nearby police arrest two pro-Kurdish demonstrators protesting Erdogan's campaign in Syria. Jacob Zuma reportedly refusing to resign. Supporters and detractors of South Africa's president scuffle outside an emergency meeting of the ANC to determine his fate, a meeting which began some 6 hours ago. And 28 establishments will be getting those coveted 3 stars in the new Michelin Guide, the famous restaurant review book, coming out and announcing which of the chefs are to be, which of the chefs receive their top prize. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at the metoo movement and its impact here in France. We've had the first prominent personality charged with rape in the wake of the Weinstein affair back in October. That is Islamic scholar Tariq Ramadan. More broadly, we're seeing how it's played out slightly differently than it has, say, in the U.S. or in the UK, the Me Too effect. But there is a Me Too effect, and we're talking about it with Marion Duquesne, who is with the women's rights group Les Effrontés. Would you call it a women's rights group?
Yeah, of course.
Women's, or you do more than just women's rights?
Yeah, not just women, but mostly we advocate for women's rights and, gender equality, I think.
Gender equality is a better way of saying it. Okay, the shameless is how you translate.
Yes.
All right. We're also with attorney Martine Moscovici. Welcome back as well. Welcome back to psychiatrist and best-selling author Raj Persaud. One of your books, a bestseller on the psychology of seduction. We'll be talking a little bit more about that in a moment. And France 24's Virginie Hertz. We were talking about it a little bit just before the break. One man who's not backing down is the French public spending minister. His name is Gérald Darmanin. He's already been cleared once in a case where a woman had claimed that a few years back he peddled influence with her to get her criminal record wiped clear in exchange for sex. That case has now been refiled a second time. The leader of the conservative Les Républicains party wants him sacked. The government, though, is standing by Darmanin.
An accusation does not imply culpability, as we've seen in the past. So I call for the opposition to take a step back when it comes to the subject. The Prime Minister said early on that Gérald Darmanin had the confidence of the Prime Minister and of the President, and I think that other members of government were able to show him their solidarity.
Martine Moscovici, should he resign?
No. I will explain you. What happened is this woman asked him for something that if she had seen a lawyer, we can do it. She didn't need to see Darmanin. I was very surprised because I do it to clear
criminal records.
I do it for my clients. I can do it legally. And also the problem is she went into his room. She knew what he was doing. She was an ex-escort girl. She really knew what she was doing.
But does it matter that she was an ex-escort girl?
It matters because you have the facts and you have all which is around her. It's not the same as Ramadan. Ramadan, the girl, they were really raped. This case, I don't know, I doubt. I'm not sure he raped her because the facts around the rape are not clear. And the prosecution will also examine the facts around the rape. There's not only the rape, but there is all the climate around it. And it's not very good for the victim.
Marion Duquesne?
I disagree. I think whether it can qualify as rape or not, it is still very shady to bring a woman who's obviously in a situation of distress and to bring her to your hotel room and have sex in exchange for something, if that's actually what happened. So not only is it shady, also I believe that the fact that she's an ex-call girl has nothing to do with anything, because if she was a former teacher, nobody would be talking about her profession. And finally, for me, the idea is that we made François Bayrou resign on the idea of false employment. So
this was the education, the justice minister. Yeah. But then he later was indeed put under formal investigation.
Yes, but when he...
So it turned out there was fire with the smoke.
Yes, but he was made to resign on suspicion of false employment. So why isn't it...
The government says it's because he knew he was going to be...
maybe, but why isn't Darmanin on suspicion of rape treated the same way? I think rape is not less important than false employment.
Virginie Hertz, the question of due process, and the French have sometimes looked down on the Americans, the way they've senators have resigned. In the case of Al Franken, some are wondering, was it worth resigning over his jokes and bad taste, this kind of thing. There have been cases in the U.S. of people without a trial or anything being sidelined in the entertainment industry and politics. The French say, oh, yeah, there's a bit of a witch hunt going on.
Yeah, that is really the cultural difference, I think. That in France, it's what you tackled before. It's always you say it's a question of privacy. There is this presumption of innocence, and behind that you send some messages to the public that there is that there can be some form of impunity. And coming back to the case of Darmanin, what is for me problematic is that a woman, a cool girl, thinks that she has not to go through a lawyer but through a politician to obtain the annulation of her criminal record, and that this politician let her think that this
so it's a statement on, it's a statement on our society, the fact that she doesn't think to go see a lawyer instead of to go directly to see a politician. We were talking about before the break last month's debate over a petition signed by, among others, iconic actress Catherine Deneuve, which defends men's right to bother women. That discussion is far from over in this country. And it also continues with the argument over whether metoo will inhibit Gallic seduction.
Men aren't our enemies. If feminism is turned into a battle of the sexes, that wouldn't be good for gender equality. A good result for feminism would be men and women being treated the same, getting the same jobs and having the same responsibilities.
There's no grey zone between seduction and violence. It's not a question of degree, being hit on insistently, very insistently, and then being harassed. There's no difference in degree. There's a difference in nature. We're talking about two radically different things. And we're being told feminists are anti-men? I think it's society that's still far too anti-women.
No grey zone between seduction and violence, says French feminist Catherine Deneuve. Martine Moscovici, you agree?
What she says, I can admit it, but I don't agree, because you can't. When they say when there is sexual harassment in the subway, you must you feel sorry for him. No. I don't feel sorry for him. He should go to court and be and go to jail. So I agree with the spirit of it, but not with everything.
Well, Catherine Deneuve would agree with you on that point. I'm sure. The question, though, is there some kind of a gray zone when it comes to seduction?
A gray?
A gray zone.
Yes. And this is a problem of the prosecution.
Yes, I think maybe for a lawyer there is a grey zone, but on the psychological side or just in normal life, no, there is no grey zone. A no is a no. I mean, and this is very clear. And this is maybe the generation difference, probably, that for women, let's say, like Catherine Deneuve, you play this game that, yes, I want, I don't want, it's not very clear. I think that for new generation is not at all the same thing. And there were a lot of reactions to Catherine Deneuve's Tribune article,
petition
that she signed with others. And there are men now in France last week who made petitions too, saying that we are solidar with women who say that they don't want this very ambiguous role game, let's say.
Marion Duquesne?
I think words mean something, and to bother someone is not the same as to hit on someone. And there might be some feminists, but most feminists don't say that men should stop hitting on women. But you don't have a right to bother a woman, as you don't have the right to bother anybody else. And for people who live in far away, a different class, different world, I think it's hard for me to hear from someone who hasn't taken the subway in 20 years that it's okay to get roped on the subway.
And then there is the other point is that bothering, if you are at the same social level with the person who is bothering you, it's one thing. But then when it comes to relation at work, this is very different, because most cases are somebody who has more authority, more power, who is
pressuring you.
Who is pressuring you. And this is a totally different case. And this is most of the time the problem.
Raj Persaud, you were talking about this a little bit, and again, you've written a best-selling book about this. You gave a TED talk about seduction. What are your thoughts on the conversation that's going on here in France?
Well, one of the questions, of course, is does the Me Too movement and the widespread spread of these accusations that are spreading like an epidemic suggest that something's gone fundamentally wrong with the whole idea of seduction? When we live in an age of Tinder and these dating apps, which basically you swipe right or swipe left, and that kind of determines that's the extent of the seduction today, has something gone wrong? I mean, clearly there's a vast difference between someone bothering someone, making someone feel uncomfortable, sexually assaulting someone, and the art of seduction. Again, you might want to do a little experiment, which is how I began my book, which is to ask people what they think a seduction is. And it's very interesting, the kind of answers you get. So, for example, arriving in a bar, seeing someone you find attractive, and then falling into each other's arms because you're both blind drunk by the end of the evening is not actually a seduction in my book. And I wonder whether, actually, given how important this is in terms of the male-female dynamic, which is a large part of our lives, whether seduction should actually, in a sense, be discussed in schools. It's very odd that we have sex education in schools, but not seduction education, because actually that's, in a sense, as important, if not more important. And I think that we have to worry whether technology is actually making us kind of idiotic or de-skilling us in the art of seduction.
Because right now in the United States, the whole discussion is over this actor, Asif Ansari, a woman who he went on a date with. She felt pressured into sex afterwards and felt horrible about it. And he tried to call her again for a second date. And the whole of the United States is having that discussion right now. Is this something new, like you say, to do with technology, or is just something that's just existed forever, this misunderstanding, these cross signals?
Well, we've had rape, we've had sexual predators, we've had sexual aggression since the dawn of human history, very unfortunately. We've had men who've abused their power, very unfortunately. We've had women who've been afraid to speak up because they're afraid that society will judge them.
But when it comes to this line between what is seduction and what is pressuring,
yes, I think we are entering a special phase because I think historically there were rules. There was an understanding of what the rules were in terms of the way you made an approach. If you go back centuries ago, the courtly romances, Shakespearean times, and even as close as the 30s and the 50s, there were kind of rules. They weren't written down, but everyone understood what those rules were. I don't think we live in a culture now where people understand what the rules are, and that leads to a lot of misunderstanding, I think, and that's partly the problem that we have. We need to go back and renegotiate and discuss what those rules might be, because have we lost something from a past time when it was clearer what the boundaries were?
Marion Duquesne?
I think in the past time, the boundaries were that women had to accept many things that they didn't want to accept because they weren't considered as equal to men. So I'm not sure that we have lost rules. I do think there is a gray area, not in terms of what is harassment, but in terms in men's minds. They've been taught since they were really young that you have to say, to go for women will say no, and then they will end up saying yes. That's why we don't only fight for women's rights, but for gender equality, because we have to teach men that, a woman knows what she wants or not, and just blaming the men without trying to involve them and educate them is not going to suffice to end this.
And all this is what you see in films. I mean, if you analyze all the films all the movies that you can see, most of the time in classical movies have the woman says no, and finally the man grabs her and kisses her and then finally she says yes. So this is all a cultural structure that we have around us, and that we have to be conscious first that there is something that is going wrong.
All right, seduction.
Also, we have in France what we call galanterie, which is a
chivalry.
Chivalry, which is a French seduction. But I agree with my neighbor. Men and women should be equal in seduction. The man has not to chase her, and there must be really an equality.
What do you think of Raj Pelso's suggestion that seduction be taught in school?
I do agree, because they don't know anything about seduction. What they know about sex, they know it in porn movie, which is a shame. It's not the way you learn sex.
I don't know if you really need seduction classes in schools. I guess that most professors or most schools would say no. But at least tackle the issue of what is a man-woman relationship, and what is when a woman says no, what is when a girl wears whatever a t-shirt, and what reaction you can have. And this is now starting in France, and there are now schools or college, high schools where women, young girls, say just no, we want this issue to be tackled, and we want to have discussions about that, because most guys around them just don't understand that if they wear what they wear, it's just a question of freedom.
Marion Duquesne, 30 years ago, my freshman week of university, this was in the United States, we had to watch a movie explaining what date rape was. And I had never heard of it, but, we've learned it, and it was something that was ingrained in us. That doesn't exist yet, 30 years later, on French campuses. Why is that?
First of all, I think because the concept of dating and dates is very new to France, and it has come mostly from American culture, so we don't have such a concept of date. And so the concept of date rape obviously didn't exist. I think, universities have, but we don't also live on campuses, so there's less proximity that might, on U.S. campuses, there's a lot of sexual harassment also because kids live together. They don't know how to drink because they're forbidden to drink, so they get very, very drunk, and they have all these possibilities of beds and, secluded areas on campuses for such things to happen. Whereas in France, it's very different. Most of us still live with our parents. When we start university, we just have classes together. The whole concept is very new to France, so I think we have to maybe start going into it now.
Is France changing, moreover, more broadly, as a result of what happened with the Weinstein case?
Well, not Weinstein particularly. The whole movement that is happening has had an impact on France. It has not had yet a great impact on our cinematographic of film actors and everything. There's not such a movement as there has been with the Weinstein story.
Hasn't impacted very much the film industry. You were mentioning the TV industry, politicians. We haven't had many complaints brought. There was a big case brought a couple of years back against one of the vice presidents of the National Assembly, and the case was eventually dropped. Martine Moscovici, is there a problem with, again, this deference to authority that makes it very hard to press charges?
There is a huge problem in France with deference and with powerful men. This is true. But also when my clients who are not raped by powerful men go to police, as I told you, they have problems to complain because police doesn't welcome victims as well as they should be.
But concerning the changes in France, it's true that the metoo movement had no concrete impact. That is to say that no one resigned really. But there is a discussion going on, and there are a lot of women and men too who are discussing the issue and getting suddenly conscious that there is a problem, that things has to be changed, and this is really the first the first step, and that the things are changing.
7 years ago, Raj Persaud, when the Dominique Strauss-Kahn affair broke, they said, France will never be the same. And there have been some changes, but not enough, say feminists. Could it all die down now as well?
Well, there is a grave danger of that. And of course, we have to think hard about something, which is how much confidence do people have in the legal system in France or the social system to support women to come forward? People are very cynical. They're not confident that both in Britain and America and maybe in France in particular, that justice will be served. If people get off, they're not convinced that actually they deserve to get off and vice versa. So the legal system does have to think very, very hard about the confidence people have in it. And the other key issue about power, which has been mentioned, the psychological research on this is really very interesting, that it's not genuinely powerful men, i.e. men who take power, the sense of power with a great sense of responsibility, see power as a burden, for example, to be discharged as a privilege, to be taken seriously, are the ones you have to worry about. The research indicates it's actually people who pursue power because they want sex as a result of it, and often people are pursuing power for completely the wrong reasons. So when these accusations come up, they raise a deeper question about whether these people are going to wield power in a helpful and sensible manner. There are a group of men who want to be powerful, not because they want to wield power in a responsible and sensible manner, but actually they really pursuing it for another agenda, which is it's a way for them to pursue women.
That they want to wield power in order to have sex?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. There's a sense in which why do people pursue power? There's good reasons for pursuing it, which is you want to change the world and make the world a better place. You want to discharge that power with responsibility. And those people, by the way, see power as a burden. But there's clearly a group of men who are pursuing power for completely the wrong reasons. They like the attention, and they like the fact that women are sometimes attracted, or very often attracted, to men in a powerful position. And those men want to abuse power. In fact, the sex drive is actually underlying the power drive, and that's why we need to this deference that we're seeing in France towards power needs to be addressed, because there's a group of men that are pursuing power for nefarious and bad reasons.
All right, and we're going to see how people in positions of power, of course, react over the coming weeks. I want to thank you, Raj Persaud, for joining us from London. I want to thank as well Marion Duquesne, Martine Moscovici, and Virginie Hertz. Stay with us, though. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, Francois. Just to look at some press pieces that have touched on this whole debate topic. First, starting with The Atlantic and the perils of Me Too as a Muslim. This is a piece by Jalal Baig. And I'll just read one little extract from that. Anti-Muslim sentiment has made Muslims balk at publicly airing their dirty laundry. Nobody wants to fan the already raging flames of Islamophobia, writes the author. What's more, discussions about sexual misconduct and the misuse of power remain taboo in many Islamic circles. So that's one observation made in this piece. And of Tariq Ramadan's relationship with the French public space, which this article discusses extensively. The author writes, in a country that understands secularism more in terms of freedom from religion than freedom of religion, he has worked to defend Islam and determine a place for it in public life. So that's kind of describing the quite particular relationship he has with the French public space and secularism.
Virginie Hertz, again, it's this thing where there's Tariq Ramadan, who's a polarizing figure when it comes to this issue of secularism, and the Tariq Ramadan was accused of rape. Are we going to invariably going to see those two issues mixed up?
I hope not. I hope not, because this would be really a mess. I think it's really two different issues that have to be distinguished.
Another article that touches on the same themes is in The New Yorker, a piece by Adam Schatz, and he writes, Tariq Ramadan is a projection screen, or Rorschach test. That's German, I think, but I don't know if I fully understand.
The Rorschach test is, those blots of ink on a piece of paper.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. All right, okay, I've learned something today. Ramadan is a projection screen, or that test, for national anxiety about the Muslim question. So I guess it's a particularly, well, according to him, I'm just citing his take on things.
Marion Duquesne, do you get a sense of that?
I'm not sure. I just think it's easy to then, take the spotlight on another issue than the issue that you're actually accused of. And I think it's too easy to mix. I agree with the Muslims maybe not wanting to talk too much about things that could bring on more Islamophobia, but I think it's too easy for him to diverse, saying, oh yeah, but because I'm a Muslim, they're targeting me, when he's just a man in a position of power who might have abused women.
Because his defense is, of course, that this is Islamophobia. It's a
plot.
It's a plot against to denigrate Islam.
Too easy.
One other piece that I thought was just one other incident in the last 24 hours that I guess has shown just what a kind of a lightning rod for this whole debate, the Tariq Ramadan case, is Anne Sinclair, a well-known journalist, ex-wife of Dominique Strauss-Kahn, and she weighed in on the witness testimony, or the various, testimonies of alleged victims who spoke out to the press, including one called Christelle, who spoke to Vanity Fair. And
that's one of the two victims who was using a pseudonym. And
indeed, Anne Sinclair said that it was chilling and absolutely unbelievable, the account that she read in Vanity Fair of that. Now, I suppose perhaps because she stood by Dominique Strauss-Kahn during a case of sexual assault in New York, this led to a lot of comment and a lot of reaction, and in fact a lot of anti-Semitic remarks and remarks generally that were completely hate speech, I suppose. And actually many responded to that. Manuel Valls, who has been an outspoken
former Prime Minister
and very outspoken about the problem of anti-Semitism in France, he tweeted and gave his support to Anne Sinclair, and as did many others. So there was a lot of traffic around that tweet, and she ended up yesterday evening thanking those who had come out in support of her. So I suppose it does show that it's quite a divisive case and topic generally.
Definitely. Many thanks for that, James Creedon. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.